Morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Uh, my name is Manish Bansal. Welcome you everyone to this panel discussion by Inform's Junior Faculty Interest Group, or JFIG, on industry-funded research projects. And before I introduce my fellow moderator and our wonderful panelists, let me briefly mention to you about what is JFIG in case you're not familiar with it. So I'll just quickly share my screen. Great. So I hope you can see my screen. So JFIG was created in 2001 to promote the career and development of tenure track faculty of Informs. And the current team of JFIG includes myself, our Vice President, Dr. Ruwei Jiang, Treasurer, Dr. Ruming Shui, Secretary, Dr. Peter Zhang, and Media Coordinator, Dr. Stanley Lim. JFIG organizes various events. One of the popular one is Junior Faculty Paper Competition. You might be also familiar with JFIG Luncheon, which are organized during Inform's annual meeting, and webinar and panel discussions. So if you need to know more about these events, I would highly recommend you to follow our Twitter link and join our LinkedIn group. And now I would like to invite my fellow moderator, Dr. Ahmed Aziz Izad, who has helped us in organizing this event and will now be introducing our panelists. Aziz, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Manish. You can unshare your screen if you want so that we can see the panelists. Okay, so welcome everyone and good afternoon. This is Aziz from Rutgers University. Today, Manish and I are extremely pleased to host an outstanding lineup of panelists who have graciously agreed to join us today to share their unique experiences about this panel's topic, which had obviously generated interest, including from myself and from my colleagues, so which is something great. So let me start by introducing the panelists. In alphabetical order of first names, we have first Professor Julie Swan. Professor Julie Swan is the department head and A.Doug Allison Distinguished Professor at the Edward P. Fitz Department of ISE at NC State. Professor Swan is a ISE fellow and a leader in using analytics and systems engineering in healthcare, humanitarian operations, and supply chains, and has collaborated widely with organizations including the American Red Cross, the CDC, several hospitals, and state departments. Welcome, Dr. Swan. Next on the list, we have Professor Karla Hoffman. Professor Karla Hoffman is a distinguished professor and a former department chair in the Systems Engineering and OR department at George Mason University. Dr. Hoffman is internationally recognized for her work in combinatorial optimization with a long track record of practical applications in the airline industry, transportation, and telecommunication. She's an Informs Fellow and has served as the 4th Informs President. Welcome, Dr. Hoffman. We're pleased to have you today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Next on the list, we have Professor Mohsen Jafari. Professor Mohsen Jafari is a professor and chair of the Rutgers ISE department. His research focus is on control and automation sciences for energy systems, transportation safety, and mobility. Professor Jafari actively collaborates with universities, national labs, and industry in the US and abroad, and has been a consultant to several Fortune 500 companies, as well as national and international government agencies. His research has been recognized by various professional societies, including IEEE, Informs, and IISE. Welcome, Dr. Jafari. Pleased to have you today.
Thank you. Thanks.
So last but not least, we have Professor Pascal Van Hentenryck. Professor Van Hentenryck is an A. Russell Chandler Chair and Professor of ISE at Georgia Tech. His research focuses on artificial intelligence, data science, and operations research to address challenging problems in mobility, energy systems, resilience, and privacy. Several of his optimization systems and technologies have been in commercial use for more than 20 years now, and he has led multiple projects across various ISE ORMS applications, which were funded and or deployed by federal agencies, campuses, and industry corporations across several countries. Professor Van Hentenryck is an Informs and AAAI Fellow. Welcome, Dr. Van Hentenryck. Pleased to have you today.
Yeah, thank you, Ahmed. Thank you for having us.
Sure. So the panel structure quickly will go as follows. First, we will have our panelist guests to give about 7 to 8 minute presentation. So 7 to 8 minutes is the cap, which will then be followed by an open 20 to 25 minute Q&A session. For the panelists, I will monitor the time and I will let you know when we have about 1 minute left. For the audience, please post your questions along with one-line introduction about yourself in the Q&A feature in Zoom. You can throw in your question at any time during the panel, and these questions will be asked by the moderators on a first come, first served basis once the panelists finish their presentations, and as long as time allows, it will take as many questions as we can in the 1 hour mark. So without further ado, let me start by inviting Dr. Hoffman to give us a brief presentation. Dr. Hoffman, the floor is yours, and we look forward to your presentation.
Well, thank you. First of all, let me do one thing here and good. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I think this is a very important topic. I'm going to start by saying I'd like to talk about industry and government collaborations as opposed to consultancies. Consultants have somewhat of a bad rep. If you want to look at, I tried to see some cartoons on consulting versus collaboration, and consulting has a very negative connotation. It sounds as if you're walking in and giving advice to people who should already know how to do their job. Collaborations are a totally different thing, and so I'm going to create this bias in these few remarks. And just to prove the point, this is a classic New Yorker cartoon, and it says, from the violent nature of the multiple stab wounds, I'd say the victim was probably a consultant. So first of all, I'd like to give you just a very short some of the examples of how I got into collaboration with both industry and government. First of all, I worked for the National Institute of Standards and Technology for 9 years before joining academia, and did lots of different problems for government agencies. And I want to highlight that the work that I did always required some person within this institution, whether it was the Department of Energy or IRS or the Federal Aviation Commission administration. I didn't have the domain knowledge. I didn't know geology when I'm worrying about exploration. I truly didn't even know a lot about clustering and sampling theory when I needed to talk to the IRS. I certainly didn't know about how aviation worked at cruising altitudes. And so this really was a collaboration. And then I arrived at George Mason and continued collaborations, but truly with a different approach. And the approach was not to ask for money from industry or government at first, but to ask for data, to ask for an understanding in a problem that I was interested in. So for the airline industry, I really cold called people in OR departments within the airline industry to get data, because I wanted to test whether or not separatitioning algorithms were going to truly work better than the algorithms they were using. And throughout this, I really did believe that I might be able to bring an outsider's view to the problem, but I had to understand the problem from the client's viewpoint. We have done an awful lot with our senior design projects. It's an engineering school. Every senior has to do a senior design project. And with our graduate course that was modeled after the senior design projects, every single graduate of George Mason has worked with a real client solving a real problem. So you might ask, well, why should you bother performing these collaborations? Well, clearly, I think you know the answer to these questions. It addresses challenging research. You can really have a tangible effect on regional or societal problems. It really motivates students. Students are really more interested to do the heavy lifting if they're working for something that's real. And I think every time you do something, even when you walk in thinking you know how to solve the person's or the industry's problem, it always somehow creates new research interests. So I think you gain new skills, and so does the corporation. And once you've created that that collaboration, you have a better ability to get funding from either industry or from the government. So why doesn't this just automatically work? Well, companies really do not trust academics to do what they need to have done. They don't know, I mean, they truly don't know, I think, at times, that universities have activities that really are relevant to them. And companies might not want what the university has to offer, and part of that has to do with the fact that academics and corporations use different languages. And I think if you're going to do well, you're going to have to learn the language of the industry. Sometimes there's a mismatch of objectives and expectations, and I certainly believe that universities often work under a very different time scale than companies do. Companies want an answer pretty quickly, and I always tell my students, pick the low-hanging fruit and give something back to a corporation really quickly, and prove that you somehow are understanding their problem. But why should companies or agencies collaborate? Well, clearly we believe that we can help improve business performance through our new techniques, through having them understand risk better, for just all of the things that an outsider with the technology that we have can bring. It also helps a corporation locate new people to hire and know that they're going to fit in the corporate culture because they've already worked with these people. It can easily have new impact on products and services that weren't at that point offered to the public. The company can gain new accesses and skills, and the company can even get funding because of all of the government industry interaction funding opportunities. So if it can work for academia and it can work for industry, what do you do to start these collaborations? Well, first of all, as a university, GMU uses its senior design projects and master's projects to create new and lasting relationships. We use it at our advisory board. If your organization doesn't have one, it should. And you can help create it and thereby create the relationships that you want. You do require an advocate within the company to be the liaison for the students. This is critical. If you don't have somebody who's committed to the project, don't start it. If there's research you want to do, cold call companies. Now, most of you probably know Ann Robinson. She was president of Informs. When she graduated Stanford, truly cold called companies in the California area, and it worked. This was sort of a wake-up call to me. I couldn't believe it could be done. But you really have to be very good and willing to spend a lot of time creating the relationship. The easiest thing to do is to share a seminar series with any company or government you want to work with. And a seminar series should go both ways. The company should be telling you about their exciting things they're doing, and you should be telling the company about the exciting things the company can do. And one of the things that I really, in my research, had most fun doing was creating a gaming event where you truly have different players play a game trying to solve a problem. There is nothing better that helps both communication and an understanding of the different viewpoints than having people, especially if they're going to play the game from the other side of how they normally play the game.
Dr. Hoffman, we are at the 1 minute mark now.
Okay, so all I will say is there's lots and lots of student projects. It's been great fun leading these projects, and it has created very long-term relationships with people who we've been working with. It's easiest if you do not expect payment. First, start with trust, then work to payment. Understand that any data you get is confidential. If you're leading student projects, train students up front as to how to work with their clients. And once you have an industry partnership, then consider other research projects and how to get funding. Real-world applications almost always lead to unsolved problem areas, which leads to interesting new research. And most important, have fun. Do this based on the industry or the government or the problem that you want to solve. I do think it's a magical, faraway land called academia, but it relates very much to what we do as research. Thank you for listening.
Dr. Hoffman, thank you very much for the very interesting and insightful presentation. For the audience, any Q&As, you can start chipping in Q&As now. They will be answered right after we finish the panel's presentations. Next on the list, Professor Jafari, can you share your screen, and the floor is yours.
Sure, thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Karla, thank you so much. Very good points. So hopefully I'll be adding a few more points to it, but very good points. Actually, I learned a few important things there too. So what I'm going to do is just a few slides. It may look too much or too many slides, but my intention is basically to make 2 points. One is that the multidisciplinary nature of my work has always helped me with industry. It has been very, very helpful. And the second thing is the extension and enhancing my base. From the time that I started I finished my PhD and I joined university, I constantly tried and kept on doing expanding and enhancing my base so that I can actually address some real life problems. So with that, I'm going to go to my slides. I promise I'm not going to read all the lines line by line. I guess you have access to slides, so I'll be happy to respond to your emails if you had any specific questions. Now, as I said, I have a multidisciplinary background. It combines engineering and computer science. That has always helped me. I received my degree from Syracuse University, but there was always focus on my R&D work. And the focus has always been, over this 30-some years, on formal synthesis and analysis of smart systems. And I'm going to come back to that, the word smart, later on. Well, I joined Rutgers in 1987, and since then I have been there. And for the last 6-7 years, I have been chair here. Well, the number of refereed publication, again, these are I'm not going to discuss it, but I have been very fortunate to have good PhD students who have been in academia and industry, and they have helped a lot with my collaboration and outreach to industry. So please take a note of it. I think your students can help you a lot. And I have also been fortunate in terms of the funding from different government agencies. And again, that has also been a very important bridge for me to reach out to industry and work with industry. So if I may highlight, again, the emphasis on my multidisciplinary nature of work is in 1990.
May I interrupt you? Are you toggling your screens? Because it's stuck for us at slide number 1.
No, so did you see this one?
We're seeing slide number 1, at least on my end.
No, I am moving.
Okay,
yeah, my end as well.
Okay, do you want to stop sharing and then reshare again?
Sure, I'm sorry, hold on. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, if I go to the second one, you see it?
Yep, we see it now.
Okay, maybe I should keep it in this mood then.
Okay.
Okay,
That works,
okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So again, you heard me talking about this. So let me go to these slides. Again, the emphasis on showing some of the multidisciplinary nature of my work, which has been very important in reaching out to industry. So in early 1990s, when I was much younger, junior faculty at Rutgers, I started being part of a multidisciplinary project on doing a major project for Department of Defense, Department of DLA, Logistic Agency, on food packaging. This was the first one-of-a-kind food packaging system for combat ration products. And it helped me a lot to extend my base in terms of actually working on robotics, image processing, control systems. And again, later on, it was very helpful to me to reach out to industry and seek more funding in the same areas. And of course, research like this leads to PhD works, master works, and more collaboration for later on. Around mid-90s, I started working on another multidisciplinary project. And this was, at the time, this was called solid freeform fabrication. For many of you, it could be a very strange term, but that is actually what the 3D printing is. And at the time, not many people knew what the 3D printing. There were few universities and very few companies working on that. And our agenda, our mandate was to develop the first multi-deposition 3D printing system with a specific application in piezoelectric actuators and sensors with very, very fine features. And I could proudly say that we were very successful on building that. And this project was funded by Office of Naval Research. We had several companies part of the project. And again, that was another step for me to better understand what the industry needs are. This was both research and development. It was a very nice R&D project. And several PhDs came out of it, many papers came out of it. And actually, it's almost 20-some years ago, but I see that people still refer to our publications in this area. Moving on, in early 2000s, I again expanded again, but again, focus was automation sciences, but I was able to expand the application area and be one of the three principals at a newly formed center at Rutgers. It's called CATE, Advanced Infrastructure and Transportation. That center is still alive. It receives millions of dollars every year. And right now, my focus on that is in smart mobility and safety. And actually, we recently started the smart mobility corridor in New Brunswick, New Jersey, as part of the center. Again, the focus has been on automation sciences, but now the application expanding. And this brought me to many different companies, many collaboration, even beyond US, for example, in China, in Qatar, in Dubai, and Germany. Moving forward, again, in mid-2000s, I started working with Siemens Research in Princeton. It's a very prestigious research center, one in Princeton, one in Berkeley. And that was very big eye-opener for me. They hired me initially as a very special arrangement, and the focus was on automation in manufacturing, because that is what I did a lot of work on it. But slowly we moved to energy field. I must say I spent days and nights learning about energy, about microgrids, distributed energy resources, and you name it. But it was very, very useful. In 2008, we landed on a very major project from Department of Energy on protecting power grid from cyber attacks. This was a joint project, and this was followed by several projects from Department of Defense internal projects, CEC, California Energy Commission, and others in energy field. And later on, I extended this work to smart energy buildings, which has been very fruitful area for us. And now I work with Aziz as well on this. So this was a big extension and enhancing my base, but it has been very fruitful in terms of how far I could go. And this opened up lots of opportunities for me in terms of research and consultancy.
Dr. Jafari, we're just at the 1 minute mark now.
Okay, so speaking of consulting, you know, I had several experiences there, but let me move on to this, and I'll be happy. I'm sure I'll be using the slides later on for you in terms of your questions. But basically, one of the things that I like to say is that please don't chase the buzzwords. Stick to the fundamentals. And speaking of smart system has been there for many, many years. It doesn't come with the AI or machine learning. And it continues. So perhaps I should come back to these when there are questions, as is. So I don't want to extend my, my limits. Thank you so much.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much, Dr. Jafari, for the insights and for your presentation. Next on the list, we have Professor Pascal Van Hentenryck. The floor is yours and you can share your screen.
Yeah, thank you. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, can you see the slides moving?
Yep.
Okay, good. So I think it's always very difficult to follow Karla and Mohsen because they've already covered many of the interesting things that I wanted to say. So I'll try to work around those and repeat some of the points, obviously, that you have already heard. So I'm always starting any talks to junior faculty with big disclaimers, right? So they are very personal views. There are many ways to do research, and this is just my own experience here. And typically what I like to do is this research project which lasts for about 5 years and are end-to-end, starting from an idea and then moving to deployment. That's what I like to do, but that's not necessarily what people like to do or want to do. So that's one of the caveats. It's also my own personal experience and my own limitations. And so when I tell you, oh, this is difficult, it's mostly a reflection on me than it is necessarily on you. I don't think I have any kind of recipe, otherwise, maybe I would have retired already. It's always sobering to put this presentation together because you see, hey, I don't really know how I do this, but I'll try to capture some of the things that I've learned. And also, I think one of the things which is important is that you don't necessarily do the same thing when you're a junior faculty and then an associate professor or full professor. You can do more things, at a later stage. Obviously, you can take more risk. So you have to take that into account when you look at what I'm talking about. And once again, I want to repeat, I made many mistakes. And so most of what I'm talking about is derived from the mistakes that I have done. First, let me start to tell you why industry collaboration are useful. And they're very useful for many reasons. And I think Karla already talked about that in a sense. Data is probably the most important thing. It's always more convincing to work on real data than synthetic data. You learn a lot more. There is a lot more structure in real data in general. And therefore, your research is going to be much more interesting. I think problems as well. I think you cannot imagine how many ideas I get by talking to industry. They come up with, hey, this is really what I need. And as an academic, sometimes, I tell people I would never have thought about this. This is a problem that they have on the field. As an academic, if you work in your office, you would not think about this. And so I think talking to people in the field give you incredible insights. They have incredible insights. They know the domain. They know what they can do, and they will give you some problems that you may not think about. And then there is also knowledge transfers. And once again, it goes both ways. You can actually inform them about some of the technologies that they have not adopted yet. But you can also learn about how they use technology and how the business model work. And it's invaluable in practice because that tells you what you can do and what you cannot do. And that also shapes the problems that you are working on. So there is a lot of value, in my opinion, in working with industry to actually learn about the field in a much deeper fashion. Now, how best to find industrial partners? And once again, I think Karla addressed some of these, so I'm going to repeat this. But you know where the data is, right? So if you want to work with industry, you know who has the data. So that's the starting point. You also know where the domain expertise is. And that's also extremely important. I think data plus domain expertise is what makes these collaborations with industry rather unique. And then you also know where your technology can make an impact, right? So you may know that, hey, this can bring something to the industry. So once you have these three components, or any of the three actually, I'm sure there are people at your institution that will tell you, hey, I can make an introduction to these people. Universities have become much better in actually making sure that you can be introduced to a different industry because they encourage those kinds of partnership these days. Now, academia versus industry, and I think Karla made that point, and this is probably the most important point that I want to convey, is that industry and academia have very different objective functions. If you don't understand that, you have a problem. You really need to understand that. So we don't have the same objective functions, therefore you need to see how you can make a collaboration meaningful for the two parties. And so this is, this is how you can do this. This is what I'm trying to do. I think Karla said mostly the same thing. How do you build trust? And so industrial partners have many requests. Many people are going to ask them for data or funding or something like that. And so the only way you can actually survive is by trying to build a long-term relationship. And so, and this is like any other relationship. You have to build it. It takes time. It takes energy. And you have to build that trust. And when they trust you, then you can start doing more and more interesting things over time. And so you start small and then you build up. And so one of the ways to do this is to find a way you can have synergies. What can you do for them that will help them, and at the same time will give you some of the things that will help you. And so, for instance, when we were working in evacuation in Australia, one of the things that they were very interested is having massive simulations, and this was not what we wanted to do. But this is one of the ways we started collaborating with them. And as soon as we actually started doing these simulations for them, we discovered all kinds of interesting problems that we could not have thought about. So sometimes you do something for them because they need that, but you learn many things in the process. And obviously, in that particular case, we also got the data. So another thing that I think is important is that you have to understand what they need really, and what is the context and the history. So I did some work, and this is one of the big mistakes that I made. So I did some work with a particular supply chain company, a long time ago. I won't tell you how long, otherwise you may figure that out. But I worked with them, and then we had this amazing solution that we came up with. But unfortunately, that solution is something that they had done in the past and moved away from. And so when we presented, the solution, there was a big silence in the room. And so once again, big mistakes. I didn't know the context. I didn't know the history. You want to know that before you propose anything. You want to know, what they have done in the past. What do they need? Why are they asking these questions now, and so on. And so you really need to start by understanding really what is the situation. And then you show them results on something that they care about, and then you build this trust. When to ask for funding, I think Karla answered that question as well. You first build trust and the synergies, and then it will come naturally. Now, I put naturally in between quotes because, this is never natural to me, but it will, you will feel it. So collaborating, communicate as much as they are willing. That's a very important thing. So I like to meet as many times as I can because I get feedback. I understand what is realistic, what is not realistic. And then you work at their speed, which may be very fast or very slow, it depends. And then I think you need to be patient because sometimes things take a long time and having an impact is very hard. And even though you prove that something is valuable to them, it may be a long time before you deploy it. So it always takes a lot of time. Balancing applied research and methodology, that was another question that Ahmed and Manish asked. I like end-to-end research, so this is not difficult for me, but there are people who like methodology and are very focused on that. And so what I'm typically arguing is that applied research is good because you test your methodology on real problems, and very, very often is very sobering because it's, sometimes much more difficult. And then, but from a methodological standpoint, applied research is also very interesting. So you can always extract some very interesting theoretical problems. You can start cleaning up and then find something that you can solve. And you plant these seeds, and it may take many years before you can solve the real problems, but you can start with very nice methodological problems and then build them until they become really realistic. And so, yeah, my feeling about research is that it's always amazing how slow I am, right? So once again, collaborating different objective function, and so you need to understand the impact on this business. So if you want to collaborate well, you have to do something that will help industry. Sometimes it's just teaching them new things that they haven't learned. Sometimes some industry just want to learn about, new techniques in the context of their problems. So that's what they are, collaborating because they want to learn something. So it may be very indirect sometimes. And once again, these objectives are not necessarily aligned, but I have found that it's very useful for the long-term research because it helps you understand challenges, bottlenecks, opportunities, and so on.
Pascal, we're less than 1 minute away.
Yep, very easy to conclude. There are a lot of use-inspired research now in the main agencies. That's where you can start. One of my recommendations is not necessarily to lead these, but collaborate with people who can build this collaboration. There is one more thing that I want to say is that what is the big difference between an NSF-funded project and an industry project is the deliverables and the time pressure. The deliverables are more specific, very, very specific. And you have to be very realistic in managing your expectation. One of the mistakes that I make all the time is that I'm way too optimistic about what I can do in the time that they are giving me. It's a very difficult balance because you have to do something interesting, but at the same time, you cannot overpromise. So so it can be very rewarding. And I think I repeated many of the things that Karla said, but I think it's good to hear them twice. Thank you very much.
Pascal, thank you very much for the very insightful presentation and for the unique words of wisdom. We can move ahead with Dr. Julie Swan. You can share your screen.
I think you're on mute.
Okay, now can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Some might say it's hardest to go last because everybody said all of the important things, and that's true. I am delighted to be with you here today, and I am grateful to your colleagues who invited me. They probably didn't know, but I co-founded JFIG back in 2001. So, I'm delighted to see that the organization is still going strong. And I want to talk about external partnerships. It's not just industry, of course, but nonprofits and government and all kinds of different organizations. Just a little bit about my background. I was a faculty member at Georgia Tech for 15 years, and I've been at NC State for 4 years now as a distinguished professor and a department head. I was also on loan to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention for a period of time, which was very interesting for understanding things from a different perspective. I've listed some examples of some different organizations with whom I've collaborated over the years in different categories, including governments, nonprofits, companies. And, sometimes these collaborations look different and they have different kinds of output, and they might appear on a resume in a different kind of way. I've done projects that are research, I've done projects that are senior design, class-based. We've written case studies that we use for teaching, and of course, data analysis. In the last year, I've spent a lot of time also engaging with the media, and there can also be a connection there. If you're doing things in the media that are relevant for external organizations, sometimes you will get, they will get in contact with you to talk about it. So that's another way that you might be able to find a potential partnership. Years ago, I was told to read a book that Dale Carnegie had written in the early 1900s called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I had no interest in this book. I didn't think it was a very important or useful book. So I didn't read it until I was, after I left Georgia Tech and before I joined NC State. But I found that there are some useful techniques for working with people that can also be helpful as you're thinking about engaging with partners. As Pascal said, different people and organizations have different objective functions and different incentives. And so you want to understand what are the things that are important to that other organization? What is it that would help them be successful? And if you can think about what you want to do and how you can help that other person or organization be successful, then you can find a way to move forward on a potential partnership. So you've got to meet organizations and people. So you might go to the Informs practice event or events in your area, start random conversations. Most engineers and professors are not really extroverts, and I'm not either. My grandfather told me when I was 10 years old that I was a terrible conversationalist, and he was right. So, but it's okay. Find ways to talk anyway. I have had collaborations that started with a random conversation at an event because we were the only two people who didn't have anything to talk about. And so we started talking, and that led to 2 papers. So find ways to start those conversations. If there are particular organizations that you would like to connect with, talk to your department head, get in contact with the alumni development team and see if you can identify alumni of your university at that organization. Do a lot of listening and really trying to understand what the other organization, what they care about. And I think Karla said it, but what keeps them awake at night? You know, what are those challenges, and some of which they don't have the time to solve or don't know how to solve right now. And if you can identify one of those challenges where you can contribute, then they will be more likely to want to work with you. And really what you're doing is you're building a relationship. And so it shouldn't be just a transactional based conversation where you're trying to get something out of the other organization, but really you are building that relationship. There are 3 kinds of roadblocks that I have run into with industry projects and partnering with universities. And I wanted to put those on there as you think about some of the operational aspects. So one is around intellectual property rights. The universities say that they own them. Companies never want to give them up. And so where are you going to come together? And that's a really tough conversation. It's something that I try to start almost immediately. And I have conversations offline with some of the university lawyers where I tell them, if it's true, you know, that this project really doesn't have any IP. So if you sign it away, it's really not meaningful because there is not a product that is coming out of this. That can be one step forward. Also making sure that the company is aware how important most universities think of those intellectual property rights, and understanding what the rights are of your students as well. Non-disclosure agreements and right to publish is another potential roadblock. There are ways that you can hide the name of the company, that you can transform the data, and for some organizations that will be enough, for others it will not. For example, the pharmaceutical sector is very sensitive about their data, and so you want to start having these conversations early on. Anytime the company is willing to, I suggest that we use the university template for these agreements because it will go faster. It's always bureaucratic. If they're not willing to, then we start with theirs and we let those lawyers come together. But go ahead and start that process. And certainly you can look towards senior faculty and staff in your university. Occasionally, I have warranties come up where you're building something, some software, some algorithm, and the organization wants you to promise that it's going to work forever or that it's not going to lead to harm. And so there have been agreements that we walked away from because what they were asking for was just too great. That one's not quite as common as the other 2. Sometimes there are things related to data management. So understand and think through how you're going to manage the data, how you're going to protect it, store it, share it, have a data management plan, and you know what you're talking about. So when it comes up, you're ready with that information. And it will depend a lot. Is this health data that's protected by HIPAA? Is this educational data protected by FERPA? Is this pharmaceutical data or military data or energy data, you know, and what kinds of protections are reasonable and what it needs to be done to protect the company's proprietary interests. If there are human subjects involved, go ahead and understand what you'll have to do on that side as well so that you can get that done safely and to do what you're supposed to. Also understand that there are different kinds of money at some universities, particularly state universities, where industry money can come in as a contract where you are paying overhead on it. It could also come in as a gift where it's actually cheaper to give them the same amount of stuff, but there are some legal implications. They can't sue you if you don't provide things. But if you know what those are up front, then you can be ready to have those conversations with the organization as well, so that they get the most value for what they want out of your project and your partnership. We have started many things for free. Some of them led to funding and some of them didn't. But if I'm interested enough in the project, then I will do that because I think it's important to do and I think it's interesting. Letters of support are also helpful for proposals. So at some point in time, even if the organization is not giving you money, but they may be putting some of their time into a project or they think it's a really important problem to work on, you can also ask for a letter of support. And these days, most of those letters of support at NSF are a very common, simple template that doesn't have any promises of what they're going to provide in that. I see some questions coming in.
Yeah.
Keep bringing those.
Yeah, Julie, we have less than 1 minute remaining.
Okay, no problem. Under promise and over deliver. I'm sure you've heard it before, but don't forget all of the time. And move faster than academia normally moves. Academia does not move fast enough. And so you've got to do what you can to stay on that. Communication is also really important. That's it. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Swan, for the, again, very helpful insights and for the very interesting presentation. So with that, we move to the next section of this panel. We have about 15 minutes remaining, and this will be basically open Q&A. I think we do have already some questions. Manish, do you want to go with the questions or do you want me to go to?
Yeah, so let's go with questions and great. So first we have a question from Isra, and she has a question related to how did you convert your industry project into a publication? Or yeah, go ahead, Karla.
I think that's easy. I mean, it's much, if you've gotten great results, first of all, whoever you're doing with also likes the publicity. You have to be careful at times. I think if you're in the medical world, it's different than a government agency, or industry. I have signed contracts that said I would not talk about this. I would not use their logo. You get a success, and they suddenly are inviting you to their industry meeting and you have to say, I just promised you I wouldn't say anything. You got to give me a release of what I said I wouldn't say. But I don't think that's a hard problem at all. Work at getting the problem solved and the rest will take care of itself.
Great, thank you,
Karla.
Karla.
If I may just add to that, I think there are several stages in our academic life. So one is before tenureship, and of course your focus is on public publications in very prestigious journals and so on and so forth. But as you pass the tenureship, my humble suggestion will be to have some sort of a balance in what you are publishing. Definitely you need very good papers in very good places, but I think it will also be helpful to have publications that are more geared for real life problems in industry. And yes, there are some companies there that don't like the publication, but believe me, there are many companies that are willing to see the publication in some form. Maybe you're not using their data. So I think it's a great idea. You have to, of course, take very measured steps on doing it, but it is something that, you know, it gives you a very nice balance of your portfolio of what you're doing.
So just to follow up on Mohsen's, your response, like, so how do you find the best partner for your research, like especially your industrial partner at the very beginning? Because you don't know down the line whether it will lead to a publication, whether it will lead to a proposal. So can any one of you? Like,
if I'll just say very fast, my own experience has been always team up with more senior faculty. So basically you work with them, you learn, you pave the way, and then slowly but surely you move on to establishing your own area. So that has been my experience, and it has been quite good, at least for me.
Thank you.
Great. So I see also some of the questions are already answered by the panelists on the Q&As. So perhaps we can move to the questions that are not answered yet. So we have another question that basically said that many thanks to all the panelists. Dr. Swan talked about this, but I was wondering if there was additional insight. How do you manage companies who hold off publishing the work, even submitting it, to pursue patents? This is even without exposing data location of the study, or the name of the company. They just want to protect the idea. There are also instances that there is no IP, but they still hold off publication. That's, of course, in light of the publishing being very time sensitive for junior faculty. So any panelist did have an experience with some industrial collaborator holding off the publication or being very sensitive about finding the results?
This is Julie Swan. One thing is to try to get these things worked out well in advance of writing a paper. I mean, this should be something that you talk about in one of your first meetings when you're establishing that collaboration. What are your goals? What are your objectives? What do you need out of this relationship? I would advise a junior faculty not to enter into a project that would put a significant delay on their ability to publish in that kind of situation. And I would give them some ideas. Well, here's some ways that you could structure that discussion with that company. Here's what you could tell them that you want to publish and demonstrate how that's not going to keep them from, making money or whatever it is. But you want to be really careful when you're putting any limitations on your publication.
And if I may add, before the tenure, again, as a department chair, I would definitely make a suggestion to my junior faculty to be very careful in terms of their portfolio of research, R&D work they are doing, and as much as possible, minimize work with industry unless it's something very related to what they are doing. And of course, after tenure, that starts changing. So I think before tenure, you have to be very careful how much time you put to this.
So one more question we have related to networking with industry people, and it's about to connect with right person in charge of the type of problem we are interested in. It has been mentioned about the cold calls. Can you elaborate more about building these networks?
Well, since I talked about cold calling, I'll try to say something about it. I think you should know, you should listen to how people respond to the questions you're asking. If there is a connection, that's great. If there's not a connection, you might want to ask, is there somebody else that I should be talking to that you can just help on? And then the other part is maybe the discussion goes in a different direction, and either you're interested in what they're interested in, or this is probably not going to be a partnership. So I'm not saying that every call or every person you network with is going to get this a strong long-term relationship, but you're never going to find those true connects unless you're out there trying to network and find them.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
I think we have also one question which I think was briefly mentioned in Dr. Van Hentenryck's presentation, but perhaps we can elaborate on it a little bit, which is kind of like the difference between the funding from industry versus the funding from federal agencies like NSF or DOE or so forth. So kind of like a little bit of a generic question, but I think it's an important one in respect to how to, in terms of how the proposal is, and also in terms of how to run the project.
Well, if I may, definitely there is a big difference from the university perspective, especially if you are looking for promotion or tenure. Clearly, it's a big, unless you are working with some, human health sciences, specific, like in our regular work, I think it will be considered very differently. That's number one. But perhaps even a bigger thing is industry projects are very well defined on a specific target and deadlines and deliverables. and which may not be exactly the same like with NSF or DOE or DOD or other ones, even though you have to deliver, but it's not like, it's more like a prototype, whereas in industry, it could be very, very different. So to me, it is really two different worlds. And that's why we need to extend and enhance our base to adapt ourselves to this new world. It's totally different world.
So a question I have is, since this is more about the JFIG and related to the tenure package, so how does the industrial collaboration and the funding looks like in a dossier of a junior faculty? Can you share your thoughts on that?
So I think if you can collaborate, and if it, I think Mohsen is also telling you that you should not force this collaboration in a sense. So it's not, you should not collaborate for the sake of collaborating. But if you're in a topic and you have an opportunity to collaborate on that particular topic, I think it's, in my opinion, it's very valuable to do it because it will show relevance. And it will show that what you're doing, let's say from a more methodological standpoint, have real application in industry, and people like to see that. I think the key point for me is that you should not force, you should not collaborate for the sake of collaboration. So once again, it may be due to the way I do research, but typically I know exactly who I want to collaborate with because of what I'm doing. And therefore I'm not forcing it. I'm saying, hey, there is a potential partnership here. There is an alignment, although the objective function are different. Can we make it work? And so it's actually putting some value added to the research when you do something like that. But that's the spirit in which you put this collaboration in motion, right? So you are not trying to say, I need to collaborate with industry because that it will look good on my resume. It's just because it will enhance what you are doing. And this is a unique opportunity to do that. But it's not like, oh, I have to have that. It's not a bullet that you need to have.
Wonderful. So let's see. So I think we are just about the time. So maybe we can
actually, Manish, I want to ask a question myself. So if this is possible. So one thing that I think, one question that occurs to me is basically, if you have a company which kind of obviously aligns well with the research you do, why would the company pick you as a junior faculty over, let's say, a senior faculty that is much more established, that has shown success in other industry projects before? What can I do as a junior faculty to lure these industry partners to collaborate with me as a junior faculty?
I think it goes back to trust and interest and enthusiasm. In other words, if you really want to do this because it aligns with your interests in research, then prove that to the company, and don't expect money up front. That might not be how you're evaluated on funding, but it certainly does help get papers published if there is an industry that is interested in what you're doing. So it's like that statement of just a letter of support is all you'd want in the long term. And in the short term, all you want is to discuss this problem that's relevant to you and relevant to them.
And Amit, you are young. That's a big asset. That's the one thing that is that you cannot buy. So, so I think this is a big opportunity. So if you are really enthusiastic and you really want to work with them, they will feel that. You will show that to them, and you may have more cycles. You may have more attention that you can give them, and industry will notice that. And so they will say, hey, yeah, we really want to partner with Amit. He's like, he really wants to do that. There is a nice alignment, and they, and it's like when you are advising a new student, there will be a kind of a first period where you try to see if the alignment is really there. But I don't see why they would choose a senior faculty necessarily if you show enthusiasm, if you have the capability of solving the problem.
If I may also add to it, I'm not sure if, Aziz, the statement you made applies all the time. I'm sure there are many exceptions for it. But they would definitely go for a senior faculty or senior member if they have something established and proven in providing solutions. So that's very clear. There's no conversation on that. But if there are opportunities where it requires, for example, to just make it very simple, on a data science part, you have to develop a program which is very new, and it falls within the category of things that you do, and you do the due diligence and you actually show them that you can actually do it and you are willing to do it, they may actually go for more junior faculty than senior faculty. So I'm not sure if it is a general rule, and it doesn't mean that we should not do it because we are not senior. I think we should do it, and whenever opportunity comes. But before the time, the one slide I missed to talk about, there is one statement there that I would like to bring your attention. I think it should be more like from a faculty perspective, it should be more like a pull system rather than a push system. And what I mean by that is that we really have to pull the problem from the industry. We should not try to fit the industry problem to our models, but rather to understand what the real problem is. And then from the solution perspective, we have to go and find the right solution. And that is where you need maybe find more collaborators, extend your base, enhance your capabilities. So sometimes we just go and talk to them about our models, and honestly, it may not even make sense. We have to be a good listener. That's one thing as an academician. I know it is very hard for us, but we have to be a good listener. Sorry for taking time on that.
Thank you very much, Mohsen.
Awesome.
Manish, I think we're almost out of time, so if you want to wrap up the panel.
Yeah, I really don't want to wrap up at this point, all the guidance and things that we are getting, but since we are committed to keep it in, so we will wrap up, and I would really like to thank all the illustrious panelists that we have here for sharing all the valuable guidance that you have shared with us. And also I would like to thank Aziz for organizing this event, and for attendees, JFIG will be organizing more webinars on topics that are of interest to junior faculties. So stay tuned to JFIG Open Forum or JFIG Twitter or JFIG LinkedIn account. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of the day or the evening.